Let's watch this from Jeremy Corbyn. Uh, Brexit continues to grip the intention of the United Kingdom, even though it's been punted until the fall. Uh, I did a video, which you can check out on TMBS, on a sort of broader analysis of Brexit. But the point that I always make is that there is absolutely no guarantee that a people's referendum would reverse the result. People really need to know that. On some level, those who are singularly obsessed with Brexit should be advocating an option where, frankly, the parliament just ignores the will of the referendum and is undemocratic in its approach. I don't think that that's viable, and it's not the approach that I would advocate. But if you go and you have a second referendum that affirms Brexit again, then the crisis is even deeper. And of course, the crisis is already existing. The crisis in terms of real people's lives in the UK goes back to 2012, when David Cameron's government started pounding the working people of Britain with austerity. This is, and poverty has increased and so on. This is Jeremy Corbyn explaining why you need a Labour Brexit.
Brexit that would only work for the richest. Those who want to deregulate, to slash public services, deny rights at work, and still further. It would be a Donald Trump Brexit, leaving us at the mercy of a reckless and bellicose US administration. Nigel Farage's Brexit is a Brexit for conspiracy theorists, for those who see Muslims and migrants or George Soros as their enemy. Right. Only Labour can see off the Farage snake oil in this election.
Farage is the UKIP leader who's the sort of, along with Boris Johnson and others, was the kind of prime engine of the conspiracy-driven, xenophobic, airhead Tory exit campaign. And he's exactly right. It is important, though, to remember that as there were plenty of lies about economic populism from Donald Trump, people like Boris Johnson lied that the money that went to the EU, even though the UK actually has a great arrangement with the EU, because they don't have the euro and they have all the advantages of being part of that market. So that's an incredible advantage they have. But they said that the savings from Brexit would get plowed back into NHS. They dropped that lie literally 24 hours after it passed. But this was their bus. This was the Brexit bus. And again, this is, as with all of these things, of course, xenophobia, of course, anti-establishment, blah, blah, blah. Yes, but you can't forget the economic lies that these people tell. And if you don't think that those have an effect, you're also being blind to reality.
If people wonder why I'm personally maybe a bit cynical about the sort of Nate Silvers or, say, Glenn Kessler Washington Post fact checkers, it's because I spent the summer of 2011 in the UK working for a fact-checking agency called fullfact.org.
Right.
And most of the fact checks were, propaganda bullshit about Brexit.
Right.
And you realize you're I guess peeing into the wind on a lot of this stuff, and this needs to be fought on a political ground and not on a sort of discourse blog.
Yeah. And look at, I just want to read this in case
blog.
People are listening, and then please go, Jamie. But I just want to make sure everybody gets this. This was the Brexit bus with the slogan "Let's take back control." That was a slogan of the campaign. We send the EU £350 million a week. Let's fund our NHS instead. Vote leave. Now, even as Tony Blair has pointed out, this is going to, the Tories are going to cut NHS through their Brexit plan.
Yeah, it's a more clear version, I think, of what Trump did as well to try to win in 2016 that liberals still don't want to acknowledge, which is to include some elements of quote unquote populism, populist economics in his stew of, racism and xenophobia. And for a lot of people, it's probably not one thing or the other. It's probably a mixture of things, but it is a very potent combination and shows the need for an actual left critique of globalization and neoliberal capitalism and the real reasons why we're having all these problems. And it's not immigrants. But I wanted to ask you where the left Brexit currently stands. Because as I understand, I mean, I don't know a ton about it, but we did an episode on the Intifada. As I understood before, it would preserve the free movement of people more or less, but introduce some like elements of economic protectionism like they have in the Scandinavian countries.
I mean, I don't know where. I know that what he's proposed in labor is continuing to be part of the customs union so that the trade can generally still flow. And I think I don't know where they are on free movement of people. I know that definitionally it would not exist in the same way because that, like, the law would just change. I mean, that's like one of the reasons why Ireland is in crisis. The trick of Good Friday Accords is that there's an open border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, right? Like, so that they could all just say, okay, like everybody's sort of satisfied with this arrangement, because if you want to treat it like you live in one country, you kind of do, because you can just move, but you're still officially part of the UK. So I don't know. I mean, I know more broadly the left case for Brexit goes back to, like, people in the 70s and 80s who had a problem with the EU from the perspective of socialism, which is fine. I agree with that critique, but it's like it isn't on the table in any type of real recognizable way in modern politics. So
yeah, that's not why they voted for it.
I mean, it might even be why a handful of people voted for it, but it just wasn't like what pushed it, and what, like, the people behind Brexit are people that don't even want the minimal standards that, like, the EU does have standards. It's the only transnational organization that does have standards like that. They don't want those. They want UK to be like, I mean, not even, I guess they would probably say like Singapore, but I don't even think they're not strategically positioned like Singapore. I mean, they're not part of a rising continent in terms of, a place and a country that's already been trained in such a specific way since the 60s to function as a fulcrum of global capital. So all they're going to do is just continue to degrade their standards.
It's tough. Like, you really can't put the toothpaste back in the tube where globalization is concerned.
No.
Like, unless you have an autarky, like they were talking about in the interview. Like, we're so interconnected and we're so interdependent. And, like, my hope is that socialists can use these networks and, hopefully reform them or even eventually overcome them, but use these connections to build something that's not completely subsumed by the market. I mean,
but that's why I think the Varoufakis, at least idea on an idea level, like, he's right, because that's like, he's like, okay, we have this transnational superstructure. It has all these problems. It's destroyed Greece. It's destroyed the southern zone. But the fight is to flip it. The fight is to flip it, not end it. And that's what I think. And I certainly think, like, if Lula's vision and Chavez's vision of like a Latin American bloc that could function in a synchronized way to some extent counteract the United States and improve standards, that would be a great thing.
yeah, absolutely. Short term, flip it. Long term, overcome it.